Opening night is upon us, and we have some really fun matchups that kick off this new season. After getting swept by Denver in the conference finals, the Lakers seem to have kept the receipts of all of the boasting that the Nuggets did and are eager to get revenge. We also have the Suns and Warriors matchup, which is always a good time when Steph Curry and Durant go at it. These are on par with most of the other games we've seen over the years, but there is truly nothing that pales in comparison to opening night back in 2010. While of course I look back at this with a nostalgic lens, because I was just 11 years old at the time, I truly don't think there has been a more exciting and nerve-wracking opening night in NBA history compared to that Heat Celtics matchup. So today, I'm going to turn back the clock 13 years, go back and examine this incredibly hyped up game, explain why it was so important for the entire league, and discuss what made it so special. So when we take a look around the league today, it's obviously pretty common for superstars to cross paths and team up at some point. In the last 5 years alone, we've seen Kevin Durant play with Steph Curry, LeBron team up with Anthony Davis, Dame join Giannis, among others. All of these guys have been in their prime when they've teamed up as well. This is common in the modern NBA, but that is simply something that never happened before 2010. When it was announced that LeBron and Chris Bosh joined Dwayne Wade down in Miami, people collectively lost their minds. It was quite literally the first time in NBA history that two of the top 5 players in the league joined forces in the middle of their primes. On top of that, there was an additional top 15 or so player alongside them. It really expanded the realm of possibilities in terms of what you could do with free agency. And without any precedent to try and figure out what to expect, people either strongly felt that the newly assembled Big Three was going to be historically good, or that they were going to be one of the biggest failures in NBA history. Jeff Van Gundy, for example, thought that the Heat were going to immediately flirt with breaking the Bulls' record of 72 wins off their pure talent alone. This sentiment seemed to be shared by LeBron, who told the Miami fans that he expected his new team to win at least 7 titles together. So there were a ton of people like LeBron and Van Gundy who thought that Miami may have broken the NBA and would be head and shoulders above the rest of the league. On the other hand, there were people like this former Bleacher Report writer who listed out 20 different reasons why he thought the Miami Heat wouldn't reach their goal of winning a championship. While some of these were just irrational copium, like this blind prediction that LeBron would randomly suffer his first major injury, there were some real questions in there that a lot of people had at the time. For example, there was concern that James and Wade would have some trouble gelling together since they had such similar play styles at that point in their career. There was also concern that Bosh wasn't going to have the impact that was expected of him, and that he was inevitably going to take a back seat to the 2 stars ahead of him. On top of that, the concern surrounding the supporting cast outside of the Big Three was legit as well. Having Joel Anthony and Carlos Arroyo round out the starting 5 was questionable at best, and sending out James Jones, Zydrunas Ilgauskas, and Eddie House as their bench unit was downright rough. So this team had an historically high ceiling, but had some very clear holes/weaknesses. But due to the expectations that they set for themselves, anything less than perfection was going to be a failure. Their first test would come against the Boston Celtics, the super team of the past that was trying to hold on to their grip over the Eastern Conference for dear life. When Kevin Garnett and Ray Allen joined Paul Pierce in the summer of '07, it was generally understood that these 3 stars were in the final years of their prime, and that they would have a brief window to try and bring a title home to Boston. We've seen some attempts at a super team in the past with Barkley and Pippen joining the Rockets, or Gary Payton and Karl Malone joining the Lakers, but those guys were all far removed from their prime, and were simply ring chasing at that point. With this rendition, all 3 stars still clearly had plenty left in the tank, but the big question was whether or not they were going to be able to sacrifice enough for the betterment of the team. We quickly learned that this team from top to bottom placed no emphasis on personal stats, and were all solely focused on the goal of winning. The experiment went about as well as you can imagine. Despite being an older team and dealing with injuries, they had 2 trips to the finals in their 3 years together, including a championship in '08, and in the prior playoff run, they took down both LeBron James and Dwayne Wade in their rout of the Eastern Conference. Even though the Big Three clearly lost a step compared to when they first joined forces, it was apparent that when healthy, the East still ran through Boston. And even though people don't like to admit that, Dwayne Wade is on record saying that the Miami Big Three specifically came together to get by the Celtics. There was no better litmus test for this newly formed Big Three in Miami than the team that has dominated the conference over the last few years. If the Heat steamrolled a mostly healthy Celtics team in their very first game together, then the predictions regarding them surpassing the '96 Bulls might in fact be a real possibility. When it was finally time for tip-off, we were treated to one of the rowdiest atmospheres of all time for a regular season game. Announcers frequently say that it feels like a playoff atmosphere during pretty much any matchup that's highly anticipated, but this one truly felt different. It almost felt like one of those college games where the top-ranked team in the country heads into a road arena packed with a bunch of diehard fans who were delusional enough to expect an upset. Once the game started, it was clear that Miami's Big Three was going to have to get used to playing with one another, as they didn't really have any idea or plan to attack the Celtics defense, which was quite simply stifling. Boston's offense wasn't anything spectacular in this game, but Rondo was making enough plays for others to keep the Heat at distance. Midway through the third quarter, the Heat were down by 19, and it looked like Miami was still clearly a tier below the top teams in the league. But then we were reminded just why this team was so scary. Dwayne Wade and Chris Bosh are having lackluster games, both shooting under 30% from the field. LeBron struggled for most of the first half, but erupted in the third quarter for 15 points to drag Miami back into it. They hung around for most of the fourth, and then scored 10 straight to cut the lead to just 3 with 90 seconds left. However, a Ray Allen corner 3 ultimately sealed the victory for Boston. Let me reiterate, the Heat did not play well at all. It was downright ugly to watch at times, but the sheer star power of just LeBron allowed Miami to remain competitive down to the very end without any real support from their other two superstars. It was clear that if this newly assembled Big Three was able to get on the same page, the Heat might in fact reach the all-time expectations that they set for themselves. But thankfully, NBA fans everywhere were able to hold their breath for the time being, as we learned that this team was in fact not going to run through all their opponents from the jump. I had such a blast going back and watching this game. That first year of the Heat's Big Three was probably the most unanimously hated sports team I've ever seen in my life. And watching my favorite team stand tall and bring them back down to earth certainly was a treat to watch. There have been some other great opening night games since then, like the Rockets vs Warriors in 2017 or the Lakers vs Clippers in 2019, but none of them come close to matching what we got in 2010. This game did a beautiful job of letting us know what the current status of the NBA landscape was. And it was that the Heat were in fact beatable, but they were going to certainly be a handful if and when they figure it out. It was the perfect first game to a historically entertaining NBA season. And that's all I have for you guys today. Let me know what your memories are from this game in the comments, subscribe for more, and I'll see you guys in the next video.